Alright guys, here I am on the clamp down with you, John O'Brien, Jamestown Community College, SUNY, History 1520. For those of you watching who are in my class, I do have a couple sections of this course. So for some of you, if you were generally meeting with me at 11 o'clock Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you have an exam. So stop watching this and do the exam, because the exam is due at 6 p.m. on April 1st. This material, Chapter 33, will not be included on the current exam. We're going to punt it into the fourth exam, which is the final exam, right? For the other folks who take this as a hybrid, which meant you were only meeting with me once a week, no exam, okay? Oh, but you have a term paper. So please send me the outline of your term paper along with an abstract, a summary of what you're going to do in that paper. It'd be great if you could include some sources like, hey, what are you using? You need to use valid evidence, and it's often, as undergraduate students, hard to know, like, what's the truth here? I'm finding this stuff, especially online, right? Because you can't really go to the libraries anymore. So what's valid and what's not? Email me if you're not sure, okay? Generally, if it's a website URL with a .edu, it's probably trustworthy. If it's a .com, I could put something out there, right? Kind of like these lectures. Who knows? Yes, I try to be truthful there. I'm not lying on purpose. I have no agenda other than trying to get you through this course and help you to get your degree, right? So, traditional students, people who met with me face-to-face 3 times a week, exam due 6 o'clock through Blackboard. Go to Blackboard Contents. In fact, let's just do that right now, okay? So, here's your Blackboard, my face-to-face 11 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, Friday people. Go to Content. Make sure you have this set, Blackboard set, so it emails you when I put up announcements. That's how I'm communicating with you. You can email me individually, but for me to blast everybody, I've got to do it through announcements. There's the exam, right? There are 3 questions. Read them first. Once you start the exam, I don't think you can stop and go back and start it over again. Look, this is fairly new to me as well. We've been doing quizzes online. Usually I did my exams with you guys in class with pen and paper, right? So, the advantage of that was it was harder to cheat, right? I mean, for your person sitting next to you to cheat, because we're all writing those in class. There is probably some temptation to cut and paste answers into this thing. Be advised, do not do that. Blackboard will compare your narrative, your text, with other tests that I'm getting, right? Your roommate, your brother, your sister, whatever. The person, whoever, in my other classes. Yeah, the folks on Wikipedia and everywhere else. So if your essay overlaps with something else that's already been written by more than 10%, there can't be any credit. So do your own work, okay? There are only 3 questions. They're each worth like 33.3% each. No multiple choice, no identifications, okay? And again, the questions are there. So I would, if I were you, do the questions, type them in Microsoft Word, and then cut and paste those into Blackboard so you can submit it, right? If you type it into Blackboard and your computer goes out, the internet goes down, it's probably going to be lost. So do it into Word or some other word processing program. You can cut and paste into Blackboard. Chapter 33 discussion. Let's see if anyone's gotten into that yet. I know there's some problems with these, and it's probably something I'm doing, because it looks fine to me. Oh, there we go. We do have some of you guys in there, okay? Thank you, Benjamin Schrader, Tate Daniels, Levi Moore. And I'm sure everyone else is just studying for their 3rd exam. Now this is my 11 o'clock class. The folks in my hybrid class, let's take a second, my kind of rural internet up here on Chautauqua Lake. You guys here, for example. You go into your content. No exam. Oh, great, but there still is that discussion, okay? It's the same discussion everybody's doing. Oh, it's not available. Oh, good for me to know. I will fix that, and I will repost it, okay? Good for me to know. Somebody told me one of them wasn't working. Apparently, it's for you Thursday folks up in Dunkirk, okay? So I'll fix that. Keep up. I'm also going to post, along with today's video on the U.S. entry into the Great War, World War I, current events article you might be able to weave into your test, okay? I think you want to keep up with current events. Sometimes students think like, oh, bad stuff just happened in the past. We're beyond that. Like, why? Bad stuff happens today. Bad stuff happens all the time. We've been lucky for a long time without major national or international crises. We're moving on from the World War II era, right? Certainly it's been a long time since the great pandemic of 1918, 1919, but history studies change, right? And our lives continue to change. What you have as an advantage over people certainly centuries ago is scientific knowledge. So we know what's causing the COVID-19 virus, all right? It's the coronavirus is causing COVID-19. But we know it's people to people, right? It's a respiratory infection. So, coughing and sneezing and being close with other people, unless they're already in your immediate household, is verboten. Just don't do it, all right? If you have to go out in the public, culturally, here in the United States, we tend not to wear masks. Although if you look at pictures from 1918, a lot of people were wearing masks. Where'd they get them? They made them themselves. And now the CDC, apparently, Center for Disease Control, a federal agency in Atlanta, advising everyone to wear a mask. Okay, that's great, but even our doctors and nurses, our frontline heroes, don't have enough, so what are we going to do? Somebody just put this up, or I haven't read it myself, but I do trust the New York Times, most of the time. How to make your own face mask. Look, it's not going to be foolproof. Even the N95 masks are not. I think they're 3 microns wide, and the coronavirus is 1 micron wide. Yes, I'm starting to study science too. But it's going to be better than nothing. It should, in fact, help you to prevent infecting someone else. So some of us might be sick and not know it. We can spread it before we even know we're sick. Some people's symptoms, we don't know why, are so mild they don't even know they're ill. But other people get it and have very, very serious outcomes. So protect yourselves and actually protect others by wearing a mask if you have to go out in the public and there's people around. Try to stay more than 6 feet away from people. Now they're looking at that guideline, and maybe 6 feet is not enough. So keep up with the news, trust the science, trust the math. As troubling as the math might be, this is now a big statistical analysis, like how many people are going to die in this country? Well, I'm looking now at a headline, forecast is 100,000 people and millions infected. Millions infected, all right? Avoid infection by staying home, hunkering down, spending your time watching these YouTube videos and getting ahead. We got to get your education. The economy's going to recover. We're going to get through this, but we're all in it together, right? And we all need to sacrifice a bit. And part of our sacrifice is not going out in public right now until this wave passes. And we might have a breathing spell, literally. Another wave's probably going to come, but hopefully by then we'll trust our STEM people to work on treatments for the ill and vaccinations for the rest of us. Okay? There's my non-expert opinion, so, but I would not lie to you guys. Right? So, they do say if you're afraid of something, study the hell out of it. Right? If you understand what's scaring you, you have power over it. And if you're scared of this, and I think you should be, study it. Right? Study it. We do have science. Great pandemics of the past, certainly prior to 1918, they had no known cause. Imagine the great fear there. When it's 1348 and you're in Europe and people are dying by large, large numbers in very awful means, and you don't know why. You don't know why. You think it's the smells, you think someone's poisoning the wells, you think it's God's wrath and all this stuff. We have reason. That is our most effective weapon against this thing. Right? So let's apply some of our reason right now, actually to 1918. 1917, 1918. With I'm going to overlap a little bit from last time. I'm doing that intentionally, so there's some connection here. Come on, Mr. PowerPoint. All right. So we're already talking about the end of the war, 1917. Russia is going to sign a separate peace with Germany. Right? Russia, again, a little bit of review here from last time, where you can actually just go to the previous video and watch this, but I'm kind of in the habit of doing a review. Russia experiences 2 political and really social revolutions in 1917. In spring, we have the Democratic Socialist Revolution. It brings a provisional governmental power under Alexander Kerensky. Continues the war. Right? In some ways, my interpretation, too many freedoms too quickly. Right? Too many liberties too quickly. It's tough to fight a war. The war was essentially over, but the provisional government continues it and can't even arm its troops. Okay? Russia had not effectively industrialized for a great war. Many people saw that. In fact, in 1917, many soldiers start to abandon. They go AWOL, right? Absent without leave. They abandon they abandon the army. I don't want to say they abandoned their comrades, because their comrades kind of turned around with them and went back home to try to defend their families, to try to feed their families. So the war, for all intents and purposes, was lost by Russia. Arriving in Petrograd Station, I think I mentioned before how the Russians didn't want Petersburg as the name of their capital, so during the war it's changed to Petrograd. Later on it'll be Leningrad. Why? Because Lenin gets off the train. How did he get to Russia? Well, the Germans helped him to get to Russia. They knew he was a troublemaker. He moves across Europe from Switzerland and begins to call for bread and peace. What an appealing message, right? Follow me and we'll have bread. You're hungry, we'll have peace. Everybody wants peace. He'll become the leader of the more adamant, more orthodox, perhaps more extremist, right? Bolsheviks, okay? This was the minority branch of the Communist Party. The more moderate Mensheviks competed for allegiance as well. Right? But Lenin is going to gain control over these Soviets, these committees of workers, of students, intellectuals among them, and soldiers and sailors will come to support largely the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks seize power. Right? They march on the Winter Palace, they oust, they kick out the government, and Lenin proclaims the Soviet Republic. Okay? The Soviets will now be the real government, and they negotiate a separate peace. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk will carve away, for a short time, about 1/5 of Russia will become part of a greater Germany. Not for long, okay? We know Germany's not going to be able to hold on to that, but it will create a real vacuum of power in Eastern Europe once this whole thing is over for everybody. What it means in the meantime is those German troops that were in Eastern Europe fighting the Russians can now be, once winter's over, launched against the Allies, the British, French, plus the Americans who are arriving in the spring of 1918. So let's get the Americans in. The United States enters the war, and we'll see the collapse of the Central Powers. Okay, there's that title from your book. The United States had been making loans to the British and the French, to the Italians to a lesser degree, through the war. They were loaning money, especially to the British, and then the British, with that money, were buying American materiel and food, right? War goods. How do you get stuff there? Well, it has to go by ship. Okay, there's really no air transport, certainly not across the Atlantic at this time. And the Germans begin to sink merchant vessels. They sink naval vessels as well. They sink whatever they can sink. In 1915, the Lusitania, a huge passenger liner, goes down off the coast of Ireland. Wilson essentially calls upon the German military government at this time to cease submarine warfare. It's a sneaky boat. It doesn't follow the rules of war. Here's this, schoolmaster, Woodrow Wilson, lecturing the German high command. Right? Two generals at the time really running, Ludendorff and Hindenburg, running Germany. And they back off. The Germans back off. They don't want the United States to enter the war, at least not yet. They stop their submarine warfare, but remember, on the surface, the boats are going to the British and the French, and almost nothing's getting into Germany, or actually other parts of the Baltic region. Sweden, the Swedish people are going hungry. They're not even directly involved in the war because no food's coming in. That's another story. When the Germans go back to using their submarine warfare, their submarines, Wilson asks for a declaration of war. He goes to Congress, asks for a declaration of war. He has to sell it to the American people. It can't be just a war to make the seas safe for American shipping. Who's going to vote for that, right? It has to be something greater. And here's this kind of moralist, progressive Wilson calling for a war to end all war to make the world safe for democracy. He doesn't get a unanimous vote. Okay? There's a huge anti-war sentiment in the United States. Like, why should we get involved in Europe? And keep in mind, it's 1917. The Civil War had concluded, very brutal American Civil War in 1865. There's still living survivors of the American Civil War. And in my reading, the mayor of Jamestown, for example, Samuel Carlson, speaks, he's the mayor of Jamestown, he's a liberal Republican, speaks out against the war. He speaks to a group of Civil War veterans, and he's like, do you remember how awful that war was, this factory warfare, right, industrial warfare? Can you imagine how bad this one's going to be? He spoke out against the war. And so did many others, okay? But nonetheless, here we go. I should mention, I think I did last time as well, a female member of Congress. Women were not voting nationally yet, but in Montana and some other western states there were, and from Montana, Jeannette Rankin voted for war. I always remember Jeannette Rankin because there was an exam. I did take an exam, and she was one of the multiple choice questions, or she was the answer to one of the questions, and I missed it. I'm like, how could a woman be voting against the war? Women couldn't even vote. Well, John, yes, women in Montana were voting and elected one of their own. So, nonetheless, Wilson has to make this war a great crusade. Progressives who wanted to create a more progressive, right, better society were initially against the war, but some of them go with Wilson on this. Well, a war to make the world safe for democracy and get rid of the Kaiser, right? Get rid of these Huns, these Germans, as they were being called at the time. Some progressives go in favor of the war, which really split the national progressive movement in this country. So, stalemate's broken. Here come, the Yanks are coming. Young, fresh, naive. They're going to go off and fight. They're not even well armed. Come on, Wilson. We don't even have enough guns for our troops. They're not well trained. These guys are doing like calisthenics on the boats going across the Atlantic. The French army has to give them weapons when they get there. But nonetheless, it breaks the stalemate. They were as young, as fresh, enthusiastic as European powers had been back in August of 1914. And in many ways, it's a straw that breaks the back of the Central Powers. Okay, so tips the scales for the Allies. There are many fronts collapsing by this time, however. There had been an Irish rebellion in 1916. Irish nationalists want freedom from Britain, right? That is crushed. This was not a good time, the British felt, to be rebelling against them. And that was crushed, but in the next few years, much of Ireland will go free and independent. French troops begin to mutiny against their own officers. In Germany, there are food riots. The German government had already rationed food. If you were in the army, you got this much food. If you worked in an armaments factory, you got this much. And if you were a farmer, maybe did this much, and everyone else, basically starvation diet. Okay? The Germans launched that final major offensive in the spring of 1918. They no longer needed their eastern troops. They could throw them all westward once the winter had broken, although it was quite muddy. And they were also beset by flu, right? Great flu pandemic of 1918. Probably started in Kansas, probably of an avian H1N5, I believe. I know I'm being quoted on this, it's not fair. You can look it up, right? But I believe it was an avian flu. Right? So originally come from birds. Coronavirus, we think, the current virus, we think, came from bats via pangolins, scaly reptiles, like I don't even know what they are, right? But they were, basically what happened somewhere along the line, like probably sick birds in 1917, 1918. Somehow the blood of sick birds got mixed with the blood of human being. Right? Maybe you're slaughtering birds or something. That virus is transmuted to the human and mutates again, past human to human to human. Right? Probably in Kansas, military barracks in Kansas, we believe. It became worse. Here's the scary thing. As a historian, the flu pandemic became worse. It was pretty bad in the United States early 1918. Then our troops carried to Europe. It spreads from there, and it gets worse. And these guys living in these very fetid conditions in these trenches are just decimated. But it soon spreads beyond. It soon spreads beyond the armed forces of both sides to affect millions of people, for example, in India, who weren't directly in the war. People of India would argue, and they say, yes, we were feeding British troops and our young men were drafted in the British ranks. That is true, right? But war didn't take place in India. But millions of people in India. People in Jamestown, New York are dying of the pandemic late 1918, early 1919.